What unfair policies were practiced during times of war? Hey everyone, welcome back to Wisdom and Wonders. Today we are diving into a serious but fascinating topic, the unfair policies that have been practiced during times of war. Wars have shaped our history, and unfortunately, they often bring about policies that can be quite unfair to certain groups of people. Let's explore some of these policies, understand their impacts, and reflect on the lessons we can learn from them. Internment camps in World War II. Let's start with one of the most infamous examples, the internment of Japanese Americans during World War II. After the attack on Pearl Harbor in 1941, there was a wave of fear and suspicion towards Japanese Americans living in the United States. Executive Order 9066. In 1942, President Franklin D. Roosevelt signed Executive Order 9066, which allowed the military to forcibly relocate over 120,000 Japanese Americans to internment camps. Despite many being US citizens, they were stripped of their homes, businesses, and civil rights. Impact on families. Families were given little time to prepare and often lost everything they owned. Life in the camps was harsh, with inadequate living conditions, limited freedom, and constant surveillance. The policy was later recognized as a grave injustice, and in 1988 the US government formally apologized and provided reparations to survivors. This policy not only violated the rights of Japanese Americans, but also highlighted how fear can lead to prejudice and discrimination during wartime. The use of propaganda. Next, let's talk about propaganda, which has been widely used in various conflicts. While propaganda itself is not inherently unfair, it often includes misleading or dehumanizing information about the enemy. During both world wars, governments created posters and films that depicted enemy soldiers as evil or barbaric. For example, posters in the US depicted Germans as ruthless monsters. This not only justified the war, but also encouraged hatred and violence against civilians of those nations. Impact on society. Such propaganda can fuel xenophobia and justify unjust actions, leading to mistreatment of people based solely on their nationality. This was evident in both world wars and continues to happen in conflicts today. Propaganda shows how narratives can be twisted during wartime to serve political ends, often at the expense of truth and humanity. The draft and discrimination. Another unfair policy during wartime is the practice of conscription or the draft. While many countries implement drafts to fill their military ranks, these policies have often been unfair, particularly in terms of who gets drafted. Vietnam War draft. During the Vietnam War, many young men were drafted into service, often disproportionately affecting minorities and those from lower socio-economic backgrounds. Wealthier individuals could often avoid the draft through deferments, education, or even emigration. Impact on communities. This created a sense of injustice and resentment, particularly among those who felt they were forced to fight for a war that did not affect them as much as it did others. Protests erupted across the US, leading to significant social upheaval. The draft exemplifies how war policies can deepen social inequalities and create divisions within society. War crimes and human rights violations. War crimes are perhaps the most egregious example of unfair policies during conflict. These include actions that violate international laws and the rules of warfare. The Holocaust. One of the most horrific examples of war crimes was the Holocaust during World War II, where 6 million Jews, along with millions of others, were systematically exterminated by the Nazi regime. This genocide was justified by an extreme ideology and marked by gross violations of human rights. More recently, conflicts like the Syrian civil war have seen government forces commit atrocities against civilians, including chemical attacks and indiscriminate bombings. Such actions not only violate human rights but also challenge the very principles of humanity. War crimes remind us that in the chaos of conflict, moral lines can be blurred, leading to horrific consequences. Economic sanctions and their impact. Another form of unfair policy during war is economic sanctions. While they are intended to pressure governments to change their behavior, they often harm ordinary citizens more than the leaders they target. Sanctions on Iraq. After Iraq invaded Kuwait in 1990, the United Nations imposed strict economic sanctions. These sanctions led to widespread suffering among the Iraqi population, including shortages of food, medicine, and essential services. Humanitarian organizations reported that these sanctions resulted in deaths of thousands of children. Impact on civilians. While the intent was to pressure the Iraqi government, it disproportionately affected innocent civilians, raising questions about the morality and effectiveness of such policies. Economic sanctions illustrate the complex nature of wartime policies and their unintended consequences on vulnerable populations. Conclusion: learning from history. So, what can we learn from these unfair policies practiced during times of war? History teaches us that fear, prejudice, and the quest for power can lead to decisions that violate human rights and create deep societal rifts. It's crucial to remember the lessons of the past as we navigate present conflicts. By understanding the injustices of history, we can work towards creating a more equitable and just world, even in times of war. If you found this video informative, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe to Wisdom and Wonders, and hit the notification bell for more content. We'd love to hear your thoughts on this topic in the comments below. What other unfair policies during war do you think are important to discuss? Until next time, let's strive for understanding and peace.